All right, now it's 6:30. Hey, everybody. Good to see y'all here tonight. I'm going to mute those of you who are not our guests right now. And we're good. Cool. Well, thanks for being here tonight, everybody. We're live streaming on Facebook. Our co-hosts, Michelle Kempema, Colorado Model Railroad Museum, and WR54, wait a minute, Chris Palomarez. What is it? SPWR 54 Roseville. So we're on the same platform. I think most of y'all have been here on the show. Well, no, maybe not all of you have been on the show before, but we're on the same Zoom calling platform every Tuesday and Thursday night, 6:30 to 7:30 Mountain Time. And then we have our OS Happy Hour on Saturdays, 5 to 6 Mountain Time. So the format for this show, a little different than the happy hours. You can either call it open forum or we can call it a free for all, whichever you prefer. But maybe because there's beer involved with the, whoa, I shouldn't say that. Dean's got one right there tonight. But this one is an interview format. So for the first 30, 45 minutes or longer, doesn't matter. We'll interview, and then a Q&A after that. You move your cursor down to the bottom, right in the middle of the bottom bar is going to pop up when you move your cursor down there. You get a chat bubble. That's how you type in your questions, and we'll take them in turn as soon as we're done with the interview portion. So, and type in your questions at any time. Michelle will take them toward the end. Ground rules are: we're here to connect with fellow training enthusiasts and have fun. Be respectful, no trolling, no grandstanding, and since we're here to have fun, we're not going to talk about politics. We record the shows, post them on the Caboose YouTube page when they're processed, and as always, we're open to suggestions for improvements for this or for guests or whatever. So,
Kevin, I got a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm back here. I'm back in the mountains here, and I don't interact with a whole lot of people, especially nowadays. But what is trolling? I've heard it, several people say it. Is it, what does that mean? Enlighten me, please. Sorry to ask.
Trolling? No. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing because I appreciate that term. And there are even trolls up in the hollers. There might be more trolls up in the hollers. I don't know. But trolls are people who have nothing better to do with their life than to hang around on the internet and basically create havoc.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's not me. No.
Just well, let me summarize it this way. I heard a quote one time. I can't remember who this quote is attributed to. But you ever notice how there's no statues erected to critics? We'll leave it at that. And there are no statues for trolls except those little gnomes that are in people's front yard. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest tonight. Paul Brenneke is our president and fearless leader at the Front Range Division of the National Model Railroad Association. And tonight we're going to talk about and see after a bit here his beautiful N-scale Grand Road. Paul, welcome, and thank you for joining us on OS tonight.
Thanks, Kevin.
So as we always start out, I want you to tell us, if you would, a little bit about your background, about where you grew up, and about especially your interest in and passion for trains.
Super. Well, I was basically born and raised here in Golden, Colorado.
You're the one.
Yes.
I knew somebody was.
and my father was connected with the Colorado School of Mines. He was the director of athletics and the head football coach for 29 years there. And
that's cool.
I, of course, went to Golden High School, and then when I graduated from Golden High School, I went to Colorado School of Mines and played football for him and baseball on the baseball team. I was not a very good athlete, but I did it, and it was fun. And I wouldn't change for a bit. I got into model railroading. I think I was probably about between 8 and 10 years old, my dad bought me a Lionel 027 train set. Everybody remembers those with the 27-inch radius circles.
Yep.
They were really tight. And they had magnet traction on the engine wheels so that they would stick to the rails, because those kids would drive them really fast and they'd fly off the rails if they didn't have it.
You were lucky. I didn't get magnet traction.
Huh?
Mine just flew off the rails.
Yeah. Well, it was fun, and I continued to work with that train set, and I kept growing it. And as I got older into the junior high school, I continued adding cars and engines, and eventually, about that time, I started looking at model railroader and model railroad crafts and magazines, and deciding, well, that's a step beyond Lionel stuff. And so I sold the Lionel stuff and bought some HO equipment. And in the corner of my dad's shop downstairs, I built a point-to-point layout, hand laying the track with the old brass rails back in those days. And I had, not being a very smart guy, I used balsa wood for the ties and drove spikes in almost every rail all the way, or every tie all the way up to the top thing. It was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, of course. Back in those days, we used green dyed sawdust for grass and dried coffee grounds for dirt. You know, we weren't smart enough just to go out and get a pile of dirt and just pour it on there and then put a little bit of white glue in there. And that's what we're doing today.
Doesn't smell as good as coffee grounds.
Yeah, things have really changed, needless to say, since then. Finally, when I graduated from college, I went to work for Alcoa down in Tennessee, and I moved. I guess we moved. Let's see. 7 times in 11 years, but so we didn't get a chance to really settle down at all. And then eventually got a chance to catch on here at Coors and Goldens, and a chance to come back to where I grew up and where my folks were. And so it didn't take long to do that. And that was in about 1977 or so. And I found myself watching tremendous amount of football and not doing anything with my time, but sitting in a chair watching football. And I thought, Brenneke, you got to do something. So, make a long story short, one way or another, my family and I went down to the Westland Shopping Center, which back in those days was a real shopping center with walls and a mall down the middle. And in there was a railroad show, model railroad show. And one of the corners of the railroads that were in there was N-Track group, and I'd never seen N-Track before. You know, I didn't even know it existed, and I was just blown away by the size and how long the trains that the guys were running. And I'm looking around this layout, and pretty soon up on the corner is my college chemistry professor, Dean Dickerhoof. And he has a module on the N-Track there, and he and I start talking. And make a long story short, I eventually hooked on to the N-Track group and bought a module from one of the guys that had no scenery on it, and then eventually put scenery on it and so forth. But anyway, that's kind of what got me into N scale. And then I thought I'd build a layout in my house here, and so the only room we had at that time was up in the attic. And I had, you know, attics are bad news. You got the peak, and you can stand up in the peak, but it quickly gets down to where you're on your knees, and pretty soon you got your head bent over, and it was tough. But anyway, I built a layout up there, and it was a kind of a folded figure 8 type deal. And I ran it for about 2 or 3 years. And the problem that I had was that in the winter, it was very close to freezing, or was probably freezing. And in the summer, it was well up to 100 degrees or so in that room. And so all of the solder joints, because of thermal expansion and contraction, they all cracked. And then pretty soon my trains wouldn't run. And of course, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of N-Track equipment available. but I did have a pretty good Atlas GP30, and of course they had the Bachmann, with Bachmann engines with the straight cut gears that sounded like airplanes taking off.
Yes.
And the only 6-axle power back in those days was the Mini Tricks, about U28Cs or U30Cs around there.
U28C, yep.
Yeah, U28Cs, and so that's kind of where I was at, and things kind of failed at that point. The layout just wasn't running, and I thought, man, I got to do something. So downstairs in my wife's sewing room, it was an empty room except for the sewing machine. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could trade a room for that. And sure enough, she let me move into the sewing room. Now the sewing room was 9 feet by 13 feet. And it had a door at one corner. And I'll show you some of this stuff. We're going to go look at the layout, so we'll show it go down there. But that was where I was going to build my layout. And there are a couple of good things about that. One is it was small enough that I knew that I could finish it before I start pushing up daisies. And I had to come up with a plan or some way to put a railroad in there. And I would never involved in railroad planning, model railroad planning. So I was looking around and eventually found a guy named Bob Schleicher who ran a Railroad Model Journal. He lived up north, in Longmont or somewhere up in that direction. He put a track plan book together, and I found one that looked kind of neat that I kind of liked, but it was a 8x8 HO layout. So I cut it in half and put on another piece of paper and taped it down, and just connected the unconnected portions to make a layout that was basically 9 by 13 feet. And then I started to think, all right, what am I doing here? And it's really important to figure out, to me, it's my whole life. It's important to know what you're going to do, not just throw things together. And so eventually I figured out that I had two choices. One is I can make a switching layout and have industries around, and that's all I could have. Or I could have a railfan layout with mountains, but you can't have both. And I had to figure that out. So then I have to decide, what am I going to do? Well, I like N-Trek. I like to watch long trains run. And so I thought, that's the way I'm going to go. And then I started forming some ideas. At about that time, a big deal was helixes. This is in the 80s, early 80s. But every layout, always said, we got a helix. And I thought, well, that's pretty neat. And then they had staging. Operating, there wasn't too much operating. Today, there's operating. I mean, you look at any magazine, it's got something about operating somewhere in there. Right. But back then, they didn't. And I looked, all the books I read said several things, and one is use as big a radius as you can. Well, if I had a HO layout with 12-inch, or I don't know, it was 24-inch radius is what it was in that thing. If I'd use 24-inch radius in N scale, that'd look pretty good. So I thought that's a good idea.
Right.
At that time, Eric Borman with Utah Belt Railroad was in model railroad a lot, and I liked his concept. And his concept was he modeled contemporary.
Yes.
And that makes it easy for me to do research, because I can just go up on the Moffett line with my camera and walk around up there and find something to take a picture of it, and I got a pretty good idea how to do it. And so I could get away with that. One of the things I knew that sooner or later I was going to get to be this age that I am now. And that means duck unders are going to be a problem. and so to get into this room, I was going to have to come up with an idea how to get in there without a duck gun. And that makes the thing a little screwy, but we can go down and look and see how I did it.
Yes.
And so this thing eventually evolved into just 2 miles of main line on the western slope of the Rockies, which means when you're going uphill, you're heading toward Denver and the Moffat Tunnel. There is no passing sightings because I run up to well, here's my philosophy. Whatever length the staging tracks were underneath, I was going to fill it with one train. So my longest train was on the first one outside. I could get a 56 car coal train in it.
Wow.
Now that's end scales, or I mean end track stuff. But it's also neat to, if you're down there by yourself, it's neat to watch it run. So it just you know, that's kind of my philosophy. I run the longest trains as I can run, and it's on the western slope of the of Colorado here. And about that time, I had enough what do you call them, druthers and whatever.
Gibbons and druthers.
Yeah, Gibbons and druthers. I had enough to get her to put together a layout, and so. We're starting to get to the point where I need to start to build something. I like to lay out reasonably high, so I built a thing. You asked this question sooner or later here, but I'm going to tell her right now. It's about 4 feet 7 inches tall, which is what, 55 inches or so. At the town of Terra Creek. It goes below that and it goes above that, so there are various elevations.
So, you know, one thing that was of interest to me, 2 things actually, when we were talking the other day, is when you were in the process of planning this, you were probably facing the challenges that a lot of us face when using pencil and paper or CAD or whatever to draw a track plan, and that is, and particularly where a helix or a multi-level layout is concerned, is there's a whole issue of visualizing what you're building.
Right.
You used 2 techniques that I found interesting in doing just that, and in the engineering and visualization of that. Why don't you tell us about those?
Okay, well, let me, when we go downstairs, let's cover that, okay? Because I've got that downstairs.
Perfect.
Okay, but just moving on, if you're going to model contemporary, which I am doing, even today, if you get up on the Moffat line, there's very little DC traction motor engines. So all my power is AC traction motor engines, whether it be a SD70 ACE or the Devo 44 engines, 44 Devo engines, GE ones. They're all AC powered, and if they get old, I take them off the layout. That's where they go. And then I end up running my end track and run the dog meat out of my end track. Now, I started the layout in 1985. We'll go down and look at it in a few minutes. I started in 1985, and by 1991, it was reasonably done. I had all the scenery roughed in, all of it. And so in 1991, they had the NMRA convention here in Denver, and I had some people say, "Hey, get that on the layout tour." And I had never had a layout tour, ever. So I said, "Sure," not realizing that there were busloads of people coming to my house. We had 400. We had 10 buses at 40. Let's just assume there's 40 people on a bus. That's 400 people through this house.
Amazing.
There's only enough room, and around the wall layout, there's only enough room for 4 people where you can see the layout. We had people all over the house. We had people in the backyard. We had buses lined up down the street. And my point, just bringing that up, is if you're ever going to do something like that, you got to plan ahead a little bit. How are you going to accommodate the people? And if you're going to have a layout that you want people to see it, you're going to have some aisles wide enough that people can get up and down and so forth. So anyway, that's just some thoughts. The other thought was that I wanted to bring up at that time that one of the people coming through was Gordy Odegaard, who is with the Model Railroader magazine, and I think he was an N-scaler, as I recall. And anyway,
N-scale Milwaukee Road.
Yeah, and anyway, he got back to the editor of the Model Railroader, which I just looked up, and it was Andy Sprandio was the editor at that time. And then 2 days later, poor old Gordy died here in Denver. But anyway, a few weeks after that, why Andy called me and asked if he could maybe make an article about the layout. And I, of course, didn't have any brains. I thought that would really be neat to be a Model Railroader. Wow. Anyway, make a long story short, he sent out a guy named George Hall, who was their photographer, and he showed up with basically a steamer crate, a steamer trunk.
Yes.
Full lighting equipment and a camera. And in this little dinky room here, we're trying to jam all this stuff in, and we plugged in the lights, and it blew the circuit breaker, and I started running extension cords all over the house so that the lights would stay on. And anyway, we eventually got the photographs done, and eventually that was my first chance to get Model Railroader magazine. So that was kind of neat. Maybe at this point you want to go downstairs.
Sure.
Kevin, this is the model that I made of the model or the layout, and where I was having trouble with was the clearances back into here. And after I built the model, I could figure out where things were going to go. And you can see the helix, and you can see over here a yard.
Yep.
Which doesn't have a chance to fit in the real world. Well, you can always draw stuff, but you can't build it. So this is significantly changed from what this looks like.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Now I used this to make this, which is a clay model of the layout.
Of the topography.
Yes.
Yes.
And on it, there's the topography, and this allowed me to paint the backdrop. I knew that this is the entrance over here. There's going to be mountains here. The helix was going to be here. Over here was going to be the basically South Park.
Yes. Okay.
And then the control panel would be here. So that's kind of what things look like. Now let's see if we can go in here and see this layout. Here's the layout room. And it has valence, which I didn't have initially, and these are the bridges. And the bridges just pop out.
They lift out.
Lift out, yeah. They have, let me take this bottom one out. They have nails in the end which stick into brass saddles, and then they're connected on the bottom with wire, so I have power to the track, and I can pop these things in or out real quickly.
That's
and they work pretty well.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, now we're going to walk in here.
Well, I like that handrail.
Yeah.
That's handy.
That's so that people don't have to, let's draw this, let's get this thing down here. Where is it? that's so that people don't have to duck walk, particularly old people like me. If you just bend over and put your hands on here, you don't have to duck walk. You just walk regular, just bend over a little bit. Now,
You know, and I'd come up against that with my old layout in the barn over on the other side of Evergreen here, and realized that as much as I had to duck under there to go behind that one wall, that the value of a handrail wherever you have a duck under.
right.
That's a really good idea. I like that.
Well, it works. Now,
Yeah, we don't always think about.
now if I can do this right, let's don't look at the scenery. Let's look at the backdrop here.
Yep.
As I showed you the clay model, let me get this thing pointed the right way here. I used that to paint the backdrop, and I painted the backdrop before I had any scenery. And this picture, this area right here is near Buena Vista, after you've gone west of South Park. And then we start coming over here. I'm not sure where that mountain is, but over here, we're starting to get a place up in the Evergreen area called Doubleheader Drive.
Yep.
And I went up there and I got some pictures off of that. And I painted those. The next series, let me see if I can get these pointed right here. That was driving me nuts. I can't get, why can't I turn that around? Anyway, this is off of the top mountains anyway, are off of Berthoud Pass looking north. And I think some of the next mountains here, we're up off of Moffett Road, somewhere up near the tunnel. Right. And then we start getting into
South
the
Park.
San Luis Valley.
Yep.
With the slides in backwards. And I took these pictures while Audrey's driving the car down that straight road that goes into Alamosa.
Yep.
I just kept shooting the pictures. And then
Yep.
this over here is South Park, just off of Kenosha Pass. And then this over here are the mountains that are to the right when you're coming off of Kenosha Pass. There's some nice farms or ranches up in that area there.
Yeah, looking back up towards Mount Evans.
Right.
Mount Evans.
And then coming over here, this is off of Independence Pass. And then we finally finish up. It's kind of hard to see, and I'm going to jump out here and drive you nuts. But these are the Canadian Rockies here.
Oh, nice. Where'd you shoot those?
Well, I was up in the Banff Jasper area when I was young and single. I had a dune buggy.
Yeah.
And did dumb things like that. Okay, now we've seen the backdrop.
Those mountains around Banff are amazing.
Looking a little bit at the scenery itself. This is going to drive me nuts, and it's going to drive you guys nuts too, I'm sure.
We're good. We're good.
Okay. Well, the scenery is basically, if I can bring this thing around here, is nothing but rock castings. Very little. If you go in the mountains, there's not much flat and there's not much straight. So if you look at the tracks and so forth, everything curves.
Yep.
And there's no straight, no tangent track except, well, here's a bridge here and there's some tangent track there, and then some bridges over here. But basically, everything is in the mountains. It's curves, all super elevated, and all a minimum of 24-inch radius. Then we come around to the town of Terra Creek, which is where I am standing. But the engine house here, this is a micro-scale engineering engine house that's been spliced, has a full interior in it. We got some engines here that are, let me see, where am I? Got some engines in the facility. I got a scratch-built depot at Terra Creek. And then we come around and in this mountain here is the helix. And there might be a train in it right now. So anyway, that's kind of what the layout looks like.
So now you mentioned, you started to talk earlier about this, that you don't have passing sightings on the layout.
No,
So how do you compensate for that?
I run, well, a good question. I run all the trains the same direction. There's no way around that.
So
Now,
you do like a prototype railroad does, and prototype railroad,
yeah,
and you
you
fleet
can,
the
you can
train.
fleet, you can
Yep.
fleet.
Right.
But I have, since I have gone to DCC, I run everything in the same direction. If you, it's really dicey to run a 56 car train up a helix. It'll go down fine, but you better be having everything crossed if you're going to do that, down up a helix. So I run everything so it goes down the helix. Now,
Why don't we talk about that for a minute, Paul? Because I think that was part of your decision to finally bite the bullet and go from DC to DCC. Let's talk about that for a minute, about what you experienced.
This is inside the helix here, and I got a train going down it right now. And the helix is made up of all thread, and then I have cardboard strips on the inside of the helix so that I don't pull anything off. And it's a long ways down to the floor if it does get pulled off.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to come out. All of my, not all of my trains, but most of the trains on the layout have DPUs. And when I had DC power, DC electrical system, I couldn't run DPUs because when a train would get at the bottom of a grade, the engines on the back would push it off the track. When I had a friend tell me that if you went to DCC, the back EMF will keep everything going at the same speed. And I said, I don't believe you. And I thought about it and said, man, I sure would like to run DPU. I mean, that's all you see on the Moffett Road are DPUs.
Right.
And I says, well, I'm going to bite the bullet. So I ended up I got about 35 engines, and I eventually made them all DCC. And sure enough, the freight train they're running right now is a 2x2. I've got a coal train that's a 2x2x1. I've got a you call it a stack train. What is my stack train? It's a 3x2x1.
Wow.
So anyway, you can run DPUs if you have DCC, and I'm so pleased that I can do that. So happy. I was one of the holdouts. It was never going to change, and I did, and it was really a good deal. Now, just real quickly, I'll just show you. This is from my friend Rich Gibson. If you remember, Rich Gibson was on the show about 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, excuse me.
Yeah,
2
right.
weeks ago, and he showed you underneath the layout, he had 2 wires. Okay, this is what I have. There are all kinds of wires under my layout. So anyway, I just thought
At least they're neat.
yeah, at least bug old Rich a little bit about that. I use the NCE DCC system. I like it. It's really easy. It's really easy to MU your equipment compared to the Digitrack system, but that's, each his own. We use Digitracks on N-Track, and I can run that fine.
Yeah, now you were showing the helix there. How many turns is that? What kind of grade do you have on that helix?
That's three turns, and on the whole layout, all grades are 1.25% max.
Nice.
Most of the time on the curves, I ease off on the grade because it is a pretty good load on these engines.
Compensated, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Now, here I'm gonna be blasphemy here, but all of my wheels on my trains they're all micro trains trucks, and all of the wheels are cookie cutters.
Really?
But if you paint them, you can't see them.
And so you're using Atlas Code 80 track?
Yes, this is Atlas Code 80. Now let's talk a little bit about it, if we could. I know we're going to quit here pretty quick, but
No, we're good.
one of the things that I like to do is go up on the Moffett Road and just rail fan. And so one day I was up there somewhere, and I can't even remember where I did this now. But let me see if I can get this in the picture here. Oh, here it is. There it is.
Yep.
Why am I doing this? There we go. What this is, I found a solar-powered dragging equipment detector and hot box detector. And so I modeled it. And then I went up, maybe a couple, three, we're going to stop the train here. Oh, wait a minute. I must have hit that. Okay, hang on a second while I stop trains. Okay, then I went up on the Moffett Road, and I saw, where am I at here?
Oh, yeah.
Here. I saw this, and that is a solar-powered flange oiler.
Wow.
And so I modeled that. Now the key was the fact that on Shapeways, I found a guy who made the totes. You know, the totes are basically a wire cage with a plastic bladder in it filled with the lubricant. And then the solar power charges up the batteries, and that pumps the lubricant to the flanges.
Yes.
And so I model that. And then I go back up there not too long ago. And, you know, the big deal now is everybody's converting into PTC, positive train control.
Yes.
And so I found some positive train control antennas at the west switch of the siding there, just ahead of the Moffett Tunnel. And so I modeled those. And so what I'm doing is I'm keeping the layout up to date. Now, finally, the last thing I'm going to show here is the signals. Let's look at this. Let's look at this now. The Union Pacific converted all the searchlight signals to, let me see if I can get that.
Tricolors.
Yeah, tricolor deep hoods, so that the snow wouldn't block them. And so nobody makes those, so I end up scratch building those. Let's see if I can get this in here like that.
It's hard to believe this is N scale. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. But anyway, it makes it, and it's run by an outfit called Athearn up in Longmont or so forth. They make a system that will control the colors of the lights, and so that's what I use. Now there are some signals that you can't see, like this one right here. It's pointing that way, and there's no way you can see it, so they're not lit. They're just dummies. But this one with lights. And with that, Kevin, do we need to go back upstairs? Is there anything else?
No. I'll tell you what. There's a few more things I want to ask you about down here.
Okay.
And I want you to show off a couple things. One is you're in various parts. Well, I know you started your backdrop with photos of actual locations, with the exception of Banff, and actual locations in Colorado. And you know, from our view here, most of your backdrop looks like photos of the mountains. I want to talk to you about your and we did a clinic on this at the Front Range Division. You did a clinic on this, which was most enjoyable. I want you to talk a little bit about your backdrop painting method, because it's pretty cool, and it's one that we intend to do like a mini workshop on. You and I talked about doing a mini workshop on that on video, but give us just a quick rundown of your paint by number method on the backdrops, because I think that's amazing.
Okay, well, we started out. One of my real good friends gave a clinic on painting backdrops, and she was an artist, and she could mix colors. And so I thought I'd mix some colors and see if I could practice on one. And so you keep mixing colors and mixing colors, and pretty soon, what do you get? You get brown. You get a mud brown. And I couldn't, what I said to myself is, Paul, you can't do this. And so there was an article in Model Railroader about how to paint, basically paint by numbers. And I thought, well, I could do that. So I ended up, if I can point over here, you
Yes.
end up photographing or projecting this picture right on the wall. And if you take your pencil, you can draw a line here and a line here where the colors are.
Yes.
And so each one of those is the same color no matter where you look on the layout. That particular brown and that real dark, that's probably a number or something there,
Yes.
is the same as you will find over here, right here, and here. But what you can do is once you start doing that, you find that you can do it, is what I'm trying to say. And so you just put the slide up here, and then you draw the lines, and then you find a color that looks green here. That's the same green here, the same green here. But you can't really, it doesn't really bother you that it's that same color.
Right.
And then you can put white in. And so I ended up painting this whole thing with about 14 colors.
14 colors. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. 3 browns and 3 blacks, or 3 greens, and it works out pretty well. And you find you get better and better as you practice.
Well, it's pretty spectacular, and it looks like the Front Range and the Divide. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Of course.
But it's not. Once you start doing it, you find out it's pretty easy.
Let's talk about your rock work too while we're down.
Okay. The rock work. Let me go over here. The rock work is nothing but molds of that I make out of what they make plastic fishing worms out of. But all the molds are about the size of your palm of your hand. Like there's one here, there's one here, there's one down here, and here. It's kind of hard to see because I got some trees in the way here, but all these are just rock molds. So I end up making the whole layout. If you go up in the mountain, it's mostly rocks with some dirt in between, and then wherever there's any dirt, the trees grow.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's kind of what I model. The trees, we might just talk about those. The trees are toothpicks. Toothpicks are about 30 feet high, and the material here is what they call Wooden Scenics makes what they call foliage. Let's go over here. They make what they call foliage, which is a net with foam in it.
Oh, yeah.
And you cut the pieces about the size of your little finger, and as you drive the toothpick through, it tears them into all kinds of weird shapes. Now, when you first start out and make your first ones, you trim everything up with a scissors, and it looks just perfect. And then you find out that you can't see the trees for the forest. And so all of these trees are not perfect, but they get the job done. And in fact, if you look at this thing, and this is kind of screwy here, but there's about 3,000 of them on here.
And it looks very much like Colorado.
Yeah, and you ask, well, how do I know there are 3,000? I use 4 boxes of toothpicks. There's 800 in a box. So that's how I know the number. And they seem to get the job done, at least for me. Now, you can always add more trees.
But it can be easy to overdo, and it would be easy if you weren't paying attention. If you lived here and you weren't paying attention, or if you're visiting here and not paying attention. I'm looking out my window now, looking at the number of trees on the other side, and of course, as we know, those of us who live here know that the amount of trees on the south or west, or the south or east side, the south or west side of the mountain is different than the number of trees on the east and north side of the mountain.
Right.
South and west are always more arid. The east and north are always more dry. So there's more sparse trees on certain sides. But this looks, this looks a lot like the Front Range and the Rockies, because there's not as many trees as you might expect. I mean, when you get
Yeah,
up there in the
right,
mountains.
right. I understand what you're saying. We might talk about just a couple of other things. When you're building a layout and you're going to build a tunnel, for instance, here's a tunnel. You got to ask yourself as an engineer, what do I do with the dirt that I dig out of the tunnel? Well, you better put it in a fill somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, in other words, you got to do something with dirt. I don't know how many model road photographs I've seen in the magazines where they have a tunnel and no fills. And you say, well, what the hell do they do with the rock? They didn't carry it away because it's too expensive.
Right.
So you gotta think about.
There's almost always a cut or a fill leading up to a tunnel.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now you want to see a rookie mistake that the dummy didn't think about that? Look right here. See if I can get this in here. What am I looking at here? Wait a minute, where am I at here?
Where the bridge goes in?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of, well, there's a prototype for that. That reminds me of Pool Point, just south of Elkhorn City on the Clinch Field.
Well, it could be, but why didn't the engineer, when he blew this rock up here, just put in a couple of culverts and fill that in without the expense of a bridge? So that's going to come out when, you know, I got a list of things to do. That's going to change one of these days.
But there's a prototype for that.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there is. There's a prototype for everything. You're right, Kevin. There's a prototype for everything. I will say that. I've learned that after this length of time in the business.
So I liked your method on the rocks, the rock carving, because, you know, you were kind of going against some of the advice of some of the, I guess, so-called experts, right?
Well, one of the things that is very true is the human mind is very organized in spite of what we think. And if you try to carve rocks, pretty soon you're going to get right angles, right?
Right.
And you're not going to get it random. I'll bet you on this whole thing there's not a right angle on the whole layout. But it's because the human mind just works that way. And so carving rocks is really, to me, is really hard. And rock molds make it a lot easier. Just one other thing I just thought I'd show you before we get out of here. If I can get away with doing this. Hang on a second. Okay, what I've done here is I've just showed you, you're going to have access to the staging areas.
Yeah.
And so whether the front of the fascia is hinged so I can get it down. And then in here, let me get a flashlight. Hang on a second.
Nice.
This is the staging area here, and I can stage seven trains, and I got the two main lines going up and down. So this area here, you have to have access, because I guarantee you're going to have a train off the track sooner or later, particularly
right.
And so that's just a kind of
and you just have those hinged. You have those hinged with magnetic catches.
Yes.
That's nice. Very nice. That's a great concept.
And here's the magnetic catch right here.
Nice.
And then everything is hard shell. You can see here, I hope. What are we doing for time here, Kevin? You want to go up and you think that's it? Or
we're doing good. Yeah, you have a photo upstairs of one of the locomotives.
Oh yeah, right. Let me go up and let's talk about that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to talk a little bit about photography. You know, how you use photography.
Now I'm going to shut this off.
Okay. Let me find you here and unmute your You might have to unmute your laptop because I'm having a hard time doing that, Paul.
There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Now I do share computer on this, right? Share screen.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things we're going to, whoops. Okay. Well, let's see what happens if I do this. Did that show up? What is it? What do you got there? You got a picture of a train?
Not yet.
Share. Oh, wait a minute. I got to push the share button.
There you go.
There. Okay. Well, this is just a picture of the layout. And just a thought here. Bernie Kempema many years ago had a picture of a model railroader which had it in focus from the front to the back.
Yes.
It just blew my mind if somebody could do that. And it turns out he's using helical focus. And so this is just a picture. You can get this thing in focus from here to here, which is in, that's a long ways away.
Yep.
And it just killed me that he could do that. And so I learned how to do that. And I thought that really changed things. Of course, a lot of things got changed. Digital photograph changed everything.
Yes.
You remember the days when you used to take tungsten film and I'd shoot a roll of 24 hoping for one good picture. And the rest were all just garbage. You didn't know who messed them up, whether it was you taking a picture or the processor processing.
Right, or a roll of 36, yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, absolutely. Well, anyway, here's what we're going to talk about here. One of the things I like to do is cut the handrails off these engines and replace them with brass wire. This brass wire is 10 thousandths brass handrails, and the stanchions are 10 thousandths by 18 thousandths square rod, which anyway, you can buy them at your hobby shop. What I do is I drill holes. I drill a hole here and I drill a hole in the cab where we belong, and I bend this whole wire with the wrinkles in it. There's some wrinkles in here. I bend this whole wire, and I use.
I think you're on a different shot than we're looking at. We're still looking at the panorama with the.
Oh, really? You're not seeing this?
Amtrak train up above.
Oh man, hang on a second. I'm sorry.
That's
Let me
okay.
get that thing out of here. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's try this one here.
Just double click on that other photo and share screen.
Sharing the screen is stopped. The shared window is closed. Okay, now let me figure out how to do this, Kevin. How do I share this? Wow, I
Just
even have you on
click
here?
share screen again and double. You know what? If you open that picture on your desktop
There it is.
and then share screen, you'll be able to do it.
Let's see if that doesn't work there. How about this? How about that?
There you go.
Okay, yep. I'm embarrassed. Okay.
No, don't worry about it.
What a technical whiz I am. Anyway,
We're all on a learning curve on this Zoom thing.
getting back to this engine here. What this is a SD70 ACE by Cato.
Yep.
And what I did is I cut the handrails off. And when you cut the handrails off, they're all what they call Delrin plastic. They're flexible and strong.
Yes.
And when you cut them off, you have to. If you try to drill Delrin, you can't. It's really hard to do. I would say you
Very
can't.
slippery.
Yeah, it's really hard to drill them. So what I do is I cut even off. I take the walkways off, and then I cut the stanchions off flat, and I put a 20 by 20 thousandths piece of plastic back in there that I can drill, which is styrene. And I bend this whole rail like this. I bend this whole rail and put it in a hole here, and there's a hole here. And that's straight. And you can use 1/4 inch styrene blocks, and they are 40 inches high, which is not too far off of how high the handrails are. And so I use those to measure this thing and make it sure it's straight. And then I'll drill the holes for the stanchions, and I take the 10 thousandths by 18 thousandths square rods, and I bend a L at the bottom, which I'm going to stick in a hole. And then I I put it up against the handrail here, and I mark it with a magic marker. And that not a magic marker, a Sharpie.
Yeah.
And the Sharpie probably makes a mark about anywhere from about a 60 or 32nd of an inch to about a 16th of an inch. And you can figure out by looking at that, measuring it again, put it back in the hole, measuring again, you can figure out where to cut it. And then I cut it off, and then I take this stanchion, put it back in the hole, and I push it back and forth to see if it hits the handrail. If it hits the handrail, it's going to make the handrail crooked. It will raise it up. And if you don't raise this one up the same amount, you're going to get a wavy handrail. And wavy handrails look really bad. And you can't imagine how many, if you look at a model railroad magazine, how many bad handrails I have, even on plastic. Anyway, I then take and figure out how much I'm going to have to knock off, and I put it in a pair of pliers with just a couple of thousandth inch sticking off the top, and I file it off with a file. And that way I don't bend it at all. I just change the length a little bit, and I'll put it back in here. And if it just doesn't touch, then I put some flux where I'm going to solder it, and then I take some solder and I carry it on the iron, which people who solder say, don't ever carry solder on your iron. I do. And I just touch it, and the flux will make it flow out. And it just goes, you can hear the noise, and it's done, and you get in and out. Now, initially, I used to do all this with the soldering gun. Now I am finally learning to use a soldering iron. But anyway, that's how you get straight handrails, and they look a lot better. If you take and measure the handrail on a plastic engine that you get out of the box, it is probably 6 inches in diameter at least.
Right.
And that's just unconscionable to me that you would model. If you're going to model something, model it. Don't make a mess out of it. And 6 inch diameter handrails just aren't going to make it for me. So this even 10 thousandths brass is a little bit big. It should be 8. But one of the problems I have is you get them down to that small, you can't see them.
Yeah.
I'm serious. You can't see them.
I think Jim Kelly, in one of his columns in Model Railroader, talked about some of the compromises you have to make in N scale because of that. But,
yes,
on the other side of that coin, photography is what kind of pushed you toward this in the first place, because you can see things with the naked eye. Maybe that 6 inch handrail doesn't look that bad. You take a photograph of it and you say, holy smoke, that's huge. Right?
I agree, 100% agree. And then I take and shave off all the cast on grab irons and replace them with there I use 8 thousandths brass.
Well,
drill holes in them and just bend them. And I got drop irons. I don't know if I get another picture in here or not, but
it makes from an amazing
drop step grab irons. I make those with a jig. And the other thing I do while we're just talking about this and just going, I don't, kind of hard to see. I don't want to get another picture up here, but I cut all on the, if you don't, well, even if you do, people who operate almost all today use a skewer of some type to uncouple their cars.
Yes.
They don't use the magnetic, what do you call them? The air hoses that stick underneath.
Right.
People don't, I've never seen, I don't know if I've ever seen a magnet that people use under there. So anyway, I cut them all off.
Yes.
I just cut them off.
That's
because on this layout, I don't switch and I don't do any uncoupling.
Right.
So just
you could almost use dummies.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
because, if your train's put together and taken apart in staging, right?
Yep. I never take them apart.
Well, this is just amazing. My takeaway from this is going back to your initial talking about planning and choices that you had to make. because the givens were you had a 9 by 13 foot room. You had to have room to get you can get 4 people in that room, but you had to have room to get some people in there, right?
Yes,
And
right.
and you had to make a choice as to whether did you want to have a switching layout or did you want to have a rail fans layout, and it's your preference to watch trains run and rail fan. It's Stefan Loeb told us that the other day on his layout. He said he does it professionally. He doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be doing demurrage paperwork for model customers. He'd rather just watch trains run. So the takeaway for me here is it's your layout, and we tell people this at the store all the time. They say, well, should I do this or should I do that? And we always say, as you've heard us say before, whose layout is it, right? And it's your layout. It should reflect your interests and what brings you enjoyment. And I think this is your the Grand Road, and how you've developed it is an example of how to bring that to form in a real modest space. I mean, that's pretty. I of course, as you know, I've been in there, and it's super impressive. It's like it is a small room, and it's the size of a bedroom, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's the size of a kind of a long, skinny bedroom, and it's like being in the Rockies. It's like being in the Rockies. It's pretty cool.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, what comments and questions do we have for Paul?
Well, we have a ton of comments. Most of them are like beautiful, fantastic, amazing kind of comments. Lots of people. John Abatacola says that he had lunch with you in Salt Lake City last year, and you acted like your layout was just, nothing major. And he's like, wow, he's glad he got to see it. He also says he wants to see it in person, and I'll come with him.
Okay.
I want to see it too.
That's
Great
super.
layout.
Yeah.
And when you opened up your hidden staging, as someone said, NORAD.
Oh.
Yeah, Gerald said NORAD.
All right.
A lot of people are just really complimenting you on your layout design.
Thank you.
And the concepts that you utilized and how you used every bit of space that you had for something.
Thank you.
And I was really impressed with that when you opened up your secret compartment there for staging. That was really cool.
Super.
Yeah, and John Parker reinforced one of the points that we're making here, and that is that photography is a great modeling tool.
Yes.
And I'd say even more so in N scale than HO, because our eyes are only so good, and they're not getting any better.
Right.
And the photography can be. I mean, how many times do you see people using their phone as a magnifying glass? I've actually seen people doing that, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so, particularly in N scale, photography can be a great modeling tool because it's a way to see things that your eye doesn't catch until you go to take a picture of it and send it in a model railroad for trackside photos, and you think, wait a minute, I don't quite want to do that.
Yep.
Right?
What I do is when I take photographs, I first thing I do is I run upstairs and put them on the computer here and look at them.
Yeah.
And find out what the heck is screwy. And there is a bunch of stuff that's going to be screwy. And then you got to go back and fix it because it really detracts from the photograph.
Yep, it does.
You know what else photographs do for you is they find cobwebs and dust. And we found that at the museum. We'll take a picture and be like, oh my gosh, we need to clean that space.
One of the best things I think they're for is finding those little gaps beneath the building, right?
Yes, right.
Daylight showing through underneath the foundation of a building, right? It's like you don't see it when you're just walking around your layout, and then you take a picture and be like, holy smoke, I got the buildings floating there. So yeah.
Yep.
Great modeling tool. Well, Paul, this has been absolutely delightful as any visit to your layout is, and thank you for the story, for giving us the background on your interest in trains, and thank you for the tour of the Grand Road. And now we got to see live what we've had to settle for just photos in the magazines for, and we're all the better for it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks
My
for
pleasure.
all of our participants,
My pleasure.
all of our guests, our guests, and all of our participants. And let's see, Tuesday we have I haven't lined up, but we haven't cemented him in yet. So we're having our planning call in the morning. So we have a guest that's a modeler and a rail fan and does drone photography on Tuesday. And you'll see his name on our Facebook page here in the next day or so. And of course, don't forget OS Happy Hour on Saturday, where we basically just have an excuse to get on here and talk about trains and drink beer. So
I want to promote one more thing for Saturday, by the way. I don't know if you guys know, but there's an international NMRA virtual convention on Saturday. And
really?
it's a 24-hour thing, and there's a Facebook page for it called NMRA-X for virtual, I guess. And I'm on it from noon to 1 at the museum, and there's like every hour is somebody doing Facebook Live.
Oh,
and
cool.
so our OS Happy Hour might be kind of streaming some of that too within our group, so it might be fun. You can find it on Facebook if you look at the NMRA's virtual convention. Since there wasn't a convention, they decided to, Gordy Robinson put it together, if you guys know who that is. And then when we're all sleeping, the Australians take over.
Oh, nice.
So through the night, if you can't sleep, you can get up and see some Australian railroads. So
Good. Thank you. Good information.
Well, all right. Well, we will see y'all Tuesday, Saturday, sometime in between. Thanks for being here tonight.
Hey,
Thanks, Paul.
thank you. My pleasure.
Take care.